You know, I walked into the fibreEssence gallery in Vancouver one beautiful sunny day this week. Well, you could have picked any day. They were all beautiful and sunny. But, you know, although it was bright outside, by the time I got into the gallery, you know, it was even brighter inside, with a riot of color on the wall from the art quilts by White Rock artist Cher Cartwright. Inside the fibreEssence gallery on Dunbar Street, beautiful hangings that were filled with swirls and swoops and spirals of color. And I started my conversation with Cher Cartwright by asking her when her love affair with color began.
It's funny, I didn't even know that I had the love affair with color until I started making quilts, which I started doing kind of by accident because I saw some fabric and I thought, oh, that would be cute to make this baby blanket for a friend's baby. And I made such a complete mess of it that I thought, oh, gee, maybe someone could teach me. And so I took a course. And when I was in that course, I sort of found myself giving into this impulse and bought all this really gaudy fabric and was really embarrassed by what I did. Took it into class and said to the teacher, oh, I'm sure no one would ever put this in their house. And she said, oh, that's lovely. And I realize now, looking back, that I had lived in such a monochromatic world that I'd forgotten how to love color. Oh. And that quilt sort of is what allowed me to realize, oh yeah, you can have fun with color, and that's definitely what's been motivating me ever since.
So when you say gaudy colors, what did you choose for that first project?
Hot pink and purple and green and turquoise.
Whoa.
And at that time, I lived in a brown house, and I practiced law and wore black and gray and blue suits. So this was wild for me.
It's interesting that you even gave into that impulse.
It was really beautiful fabric. It's a certain fabric that is, I guess there's such high density to the thread count that it looks like silk, and it was just so beautiful. I was seduced, I think, almost more by the beauty of the fabric, and those were the colors that were available, so I thought, oh, well, I'll make do with these gaudy colors, which I now, quite enjoy.
So, Cher, you mentioned practicing law. Were you involved in art at all in any way before you started working with the fabric?
No, I had absolutely no background in visual arts. I had two brothers who were, particularly one who was a good drawer, and so I figured out when I was about 6 that I couldn't do that, and I never really tried. And so I was quite amazed when this thing sort of erupted out of me, because once I started working with the fabric and I learned that people made art with fabric, my brothers had never done that, so it was okay to try.
That was your territory.
That's right, yeah.
Well, what a surprise.
Yeah, it really has been. It's overtaken my life. I don't practice law anymore. I just make art quilts.
So you started with a basic quilting course, I guess, or a traditional quilting kind of procedure. What happened then?
I did spend a few years taking basic courses, making traditional quilts, because I actually, although I'd done some sewing in high school the way everyone does, like home ec, I wasn't a particularly good seamstress. And then I took a class with a woman named Nancy Crow, who is probably the most well-known art quilter. She is a trained artist, and about 30 years ago, she chose to move into quilt medium to express her art. She lives in Amish quilt country, and so she was, I'm sure, she was exposed to those beautiful quilts. And she had developed a technique whereby you did not have to use the traditional straight lines and rulers and pattern pieces that she calls improvisational quilting. And once I was exposed to that, then I could really take off, because that allows you to go where you want to go.
It's a big leap, too, to change like that, to move from measuring and being so precise to just letting it happen, right?
I think probably for really good seamstresses, it's very intimidating, whereas for me it was, oh, good, now nobody will notice that I can't make the corners meet.
And we can see as we look down the wall that the curves start to really take over.
I came to the conclusion that I really was drawn to very curved lines and even to circles, and I couldn't determine any way to completely spontaneously work and get such defined lines or shapes. And so I started making cardboard templates in which I would draw my pattern and cut it into large pieces. And then within that, each section, I just piece improvisationally. I make it up as I go, but I can get them all together because there is that traditional pattern in the end. And that allows me to get the kind of shapes I'm interested in. It just opens it all up. It allows fabric to be used more the way that people can use paint.
Right. The next one we're looking at here, this has a huge curve. It almost makes me think of an oyster shell opening with pearls inside it, big circles of pearls, all in greens and blues and some yellows and reds. But where would you start with this one, for example?
I woke up, which is when I usually get these ideas. I woke up one night when I was in Ohio in a motel room and found a piece of paper and drew that basic idea down. I had just bought an artograph, which is a little gizmo that allows you to project things onto the wall, and I'd never had one of those before. And so I actually made photocopies of that design before I projected it on the wall and tried with color pencil to audition colors. Oh. But I've never successfully figured out any way to really determine the colors ahead of time because neither colored pencil nor watercolor or anything I've ever come up with approximates the color of the fabric. And so I get stacks of fabric on my table, and I can look at them there and see whether I like them together. Ultimately, though, the decision is just made when I'm there working it. I probably started with the big yellow circle in the middle, and I just started making that until it was as big as the pattern piece, and then I could stick that on the wall and make other ones. When it's all done, then I cut out the proper pieces and sew it together. And usually it works, and sometimes I think, oh gosh, I wish I'd done that differently. But there's so much work involved by then that you live with it.
When did you start dyeing? Did you start the fabric dyeing as soon as you began working with the art quilt approach?
Yes. When I took that first class with Nancy Crow and I learned how to do improvisational piecing, one of the women in the class had hand-dyed fabric, and I'd never seen hand-dyed fabric before. You get a whole texture by, rather than carefully making it all even the way the garment industry does, you just let it sit in a plastic bag or a bucket or something, and so it pools, and you get more color one way and less color in another spot. And it sometimes can look almost sueded. Mm-hmm. So I was so impressed with the beauty of her fabric. I said to her, "This is just fabulous." And she said, "Oh, well, my friend Liz Axford is coming up to teach a class. You should take it." So I took that and just knew instantly that that's what I wanted to do, because it allows you to, it's like an artist, a painter mixing their paint.
Cher, are there surprises when you're dyeing then too? Is that part of the fun?
It's amazing. It's very much more an art than a science. There are constant surprises and almost impossible to replicate what you've done. And so sometimes it turns out really awful and you try to fix it. Sometimes it turns out really great, and darned if you can make it over again. Like this piece here, which has rust and deep turquoise or teal. All my friends want to know how I made it so they can make a piece like it, and I can't even figure out from looking at my notes how I got it to turn out like that.
Where do you think, well, in Canada right now specifically, art quilting is regarded as an art form?
Certainly out here, I don't feel that there's any acknowledgement at all that specifically quilted textiles is a legitimate art form. Until recently, I just thought I was very frustrated by it. For instance, I can't take my art across the border into the States duty-free which original art passes as, because it's not considered art, it's considered bedding. And that's that's a little humiliating. And so, yeah, I've been frustrated by being the Rodney Dangerfield of the art world. Until recently, I started thinking about the kind of freedom that this gives us. And because nobody from Emily Carr, nobody from the Vancouver Art Gallery is going to come here and judge what I do because they don't acknowledge it as art, that means that I'm free to do whatever I want to. And I think that there is a lot of judgment in the the creative fields. And so I realized that probably rather than being such a negative thing, it has given the whole art quilt world the freedom to develop much more freely than it would have.
When you were talking about just this change in life, a complete change of direction, what has it done to sort of the rest of your life, I guess, to be able to express yourself in this very visual way, having been somebody who expressed yourself with words for so many years?
My life has been pretty well transformed by the change from practicing law to making art quilts. I have a much more social life, although when you do the work, you're doing it all by yourself in your studio. There is a community of fiber people, of whom I am now a member, and I have found that a very warm and welcoming community. I've taken courses and gone to shows all over North America, so that's given me just a whole different kind of focus than I had before.
And do you see the world differently now, too, now that you're working in such a visual medium?
I was really oblivious to the whole world of art before I got involved in this, and one of the things that several of the teachers I've had who are themselves trained artists have said is that you should become knowledgeable in the area of art. And so I've taken some courses at Kwantlen and Emily Carr, and I've read books, and I've actually gone to New York and gone to the museums. And so there is a whole world of visual art that didn't exist for me. That's a very vibrant part of my life now, and it's been a wonderful addition to my life.
Thanks so much. It's such a treat to meet you and to see this beautiful work.
Oh, thank you so much for coming.
That is art quilter Cher Cartwright. You can see her work on display at the fibreEssence Gallery, 3210 Dunbar in Vancouver. That's till the end of the month. And you can check out her art anytime on her website, which is chercartwright.com, CherCartwright.com. Cher Cartwright.